He understood it not from books or speeches, but in the moment he was left alone in burned land. Because a lone fighter in war is not a hero, he is a target. Only when the voices, movements, and familiar presence of others disappeared did fear become truly animal. "You mean nothing alone," an older fighter once said, looking straight into his eyes. "Your weapon, your training, your courage won't save you if no one is beside you. War isn't about individuals. It's about those who hold together, even when their hands shake." Back then, the words felt abstract, almost banal. But now, when every sound felt like a step of death, he understood that strength wasn't in accurate fire, but in knowing someone would cover you, warn you, pull you out, even when the chances were almost zero. "If you're alone," that voice continued in memory, "you think only about yourself, and that makes you predictable. But together, you become something bigger than the sum of people. You become a weapon that's hard to break." He remembered how fear was shared in the unit, how anger became collective, how despair pressed less heavily because it was divided among everyone. That was what kept them standing, not patriotic words or ideas of glory. "I'm not a hero," someone once said in the dark before a mission, "but I know you're here, and that's enough to move forward. Because if I fall, you won't let me disappear without a trace." That is where the central truth of war is born, one they rarely say aloud. The real strength of a soldier isn't in muscles or bullets, but in the team. One fighter is just a dot in a scope. A unit is decision, movement, will, and response. And as long as people hold together, war cannot break them one by one. A team does not appear instantly. It is born from small things, brief glances, silent gestures, the ability to feel another's tension before he even realizes it himself. In these details, a fighter stops being a single unit and becomes part of something whole, something far harder to break than any individual. "Don't look there," someone said quietly, without an order, but with such certainty that doubt vanished instantly. "I'll cover you, move, and even if something goes wrong, we'll pull each other out. Otherwise, you simply don't survive here." They learned to trust actions, not words. In war, promises mean nothing. What matters is whether someone stays when the worst begins. That is when it becomes clear that a team isn't friendship or sympathy. It is a choice made every second not to think only about yourself. "I know you're scared," a fighter said, checking another's gear with almost fatherly focus. "I'm scared too, but if we acknowledge that fear together, it won't tear us apart. It just becomes another signal we work with." In combat, they moved like a single organism, without unnecessary words. A team reads intent faster than the enemy reads a map. That cohesion turns chaos into managed risk instead of blind lottery. "Alone, you wouldn't have made it," someone said after the mission, not as reproach, but as fact. Neither would I. Together, we did what would have been impossible for one. That's not heroism, it's simple survival math. They shared not only ammunition and water, but the silence after battle, the guilt for losses, and the relief for those who returned. That is what stitched the unit together tighter than any oath. "If I don't make it," someone said one evening with unexpected directness, "promise you won't leave my name here in the dust." A team means even death isn't left alone. Here, the second act reveals its essence. A unit becomes a weapon, not because it has more guns, but because it carries more responsibility for each other. As long as that responsibility lives, a fighter knows he is not a target, but part of a force held together by shared resolve. The real test of a team begins not when everything goes according to plan, but when the plan disappears, along with landmarks, communication breaks, and only noise, smoke, and immediate decisions remain. That is when it becomes clear whether the unit is just a group of people or a living weapon capable of acting inside chaos. "Forget the order," someone shouted through the roar, voice torn but certain. "Watch me. Do as I do. Don't stop. If everyone starts thinking separately now, they'll pick us off one by one." In that second, fear stops being personal and becomes a collective signal. Instead of paralyzing, it pushes forward, because you no longer have the right to break when others rely on you as much as you rely on them. "I'm covering," came from the left. "Move, I see you. Don't disappear from my sight. If you fall, I won't stay here. I'll go after you, even if it's the last thing I do." There was no heroism in those words, no pathos, only cold, hard determination. A team is when your life is already woven into others, and retreat means not survival, but betrayal of the shared rhythm keeping everyone alive. Mistakes happened. Someone stumbled. But errors weren't fatal because the unit caught them mid-fall, sealed gaps, lifted those losing pace. That mutual correction held more power than any individual skill. "If I were alone," a fighter exhaled afterward, sitting on the ground with trembling hands, "I wouldn't be here. Now I know for sure. The ones who survive aren't the strongest. They're the ones who aren't abandoned." Here, in the third act, the truth becomes crystal clear. A unit isn't just a tactical formation. It's a mechanism that doesn't allow fear to tear people apart individually. When everyone becomes part of someone else's responsibility, war loses its ability to break anyone alone. The hardest part comes after the fight, when adrenaline fades and silence exposes every crack. That's when a team either collapses under loss or grows stronger, taking pain as a shared weight impossible to carry alone. "It was my mistake," a fighter said without lifting his eyes, voice heavy. "If I'd reacted faster, he'd be here. I don't care what you say. I see it every time I close my eyes." No one answered immediately. Each lived through his own guilt, even those who did everything right. War teaches cruel math. Correct decisions don't guarantee correct outcomes. "No," the commander finally said firmly, without shouting. "This is our responsibility, not yours. We went in together, acted together, and came out together. If someone didn't return, it's not a point. It's a scar we all carry." In that moment, the team becomes more than a combat unit. It becomes a community of memory. They don't let names disappear. They don't allow pain to isolate anyone. That is what stops war from finishing them after the battle when bullets are already silent. "I'm afraid one day I won't hold," someone whispered. "Not in combat, here, in this silence when you start counting who's gone." "That's why we're together," came the answer. "Alone, silence breaks you. Together, it becomes strength that lets you stand up and move on." They checked gear again, prepared for the next task, differently now. Each movement carried not only professionalism but memory. That memory didn't pull them down, it kept them in formation. "We don't have the right to fall apart," the commander said quietly. "Not for orders, not for victory, but for those who believed we'd stay together to the end." Here it becomes clear. A unit is a weapon not only in battle, but after it. When war tries to finish a person with guilt, fear, and isolation, the team becomes the last shield against breaking from the inside. When the road ends and war steps back, even slightly, what remains isn't uniforms or weapons, but people who pass through the same hell and now look at each other with silent understanding, impossible to explain to those who walked alone. "I wouldn't have survived," a fighter said quietly, looking at battered faces nearby. "Not because I'm weak, but because one person doesn't live here. Only those do who have someone to fall for, cover, and return to." They knew it without illusion. Each had seen how easily war takes those who separate, who fall out of rhythm even briefly. Those moments etched deeper than any order. "They call us soldiers," the commander said with a bitter half-smile. "But the truth is, we're held not by rank or weapons, but by the fact that we became a safety system for each other. As long as it works, we can still stand. Even when paths diverge, and some go home and others stay, the team doesn't disappear. It's woven into how they think, react, and endure." War taught the main lesson. Loneliness kills faster than a bullet. "If silence ever breaks me," someone said at the end, "I'll know I can call you. And that will be enough to stand again. Because a unit doesn't end with a mission. The ending is simple and brutal. A soldier's real strength isn't individual bravery, but the ability to be part of others. One fighter is always risk, always a target, always an ending. A unit is movement, shared responsibility, and a chance to survive where being alone gives none. That's why war fears teams more than heroes. A hero can be broken, destroyed, removed. A team can only be torn apart from within. And as long as people hold together, they remain not just soldiers but a force impossible to turn against itself.